In this video, I'm going to talk to you about common issues in a home. Welcome to Behind the Sold Sign. I'm Logan Queen with the Queen team and RE/MAX professionals in Winnipeg. Now, there are many items that you can look at in the city of Winnipeg that could be an issue with a home. Many of these can be lack of maintenance. Some of them are just straight up headaches from a time well past. But these are the things that when I am touring a home, I'm looking for, and I'm trying to either protect my clients from or give you all the information you can to make an educated decision of your own. Let me just start this off by saying I am not a qualified home inspector. I am not a qualified electrician, plumber, any of those things. However, I have spent a lot of time with people in the trades. I have spent a lot of time with home inspectors, and I keep myself pretty up to date on the codes and the changes and what we're expecting to see in a home in 2024. So why don't we start talking about different time periods? If you look at the history of Winnipeg and homes in Winnipeg, really you're not going to see too many homes on the market around the 1900s or earlier. It's very rare. I think the latest or oldest house I've ever seen was 1980. Almost everything else that you're gonna see is typically around the 1900 to 1910 mark, if it's still standing. But generally, you're gonna see a lot more properties further towards the end of the 21st century. Typically, you're going to find more properties in like the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and newer. You won't see a lot of homes around that 1900 mark. Yes, in certain areas of the city where development was high and it was more prestigious around the 1900s, where people spent more money on building and construction at the time period, for sure, you will see a lot more of those houses still standing. For example, a lot of those houses you will see in River Heights. Some of them can be in St. James. It really depends on what the trade routes were at the time and where people were building their, nicer homes, that they spent more money on a foundation or the quality of construction to make those homes almost historical and still stand. Armstrong's Point is one of the spots that is really well known for kind of historic old homes that are grand and still standing and very opulent for the time they were constructed and are still very nice now. But with those time period changes, obviously we have what is code compliance, and building codes change over time. And in the early 1900s, there really wasn't any building code. You build a house, right? And as things progress and as we go on through the 1900s, building codes changed, building standards changed, all that type of stuff. So if you are looking at a home that is a turn of the century home, a lot of the things to kind of pay attention to are also just the timeline. There's a chance that there's been a lot of hands transferred through these homes. A lot of families have lived here, come and gone, different owners. So you really just aren't necessarily sure what anyone has done at a given time or when something was done. So there is just more history and more time for there to be different changes, different styles of construction to have been completed throughout the home that could cause potential issues, or it could just be that people have been upgrading the right way over time and it could be good. So it really depends on what you see at the home. But if you are looking at early 1900s houses, some of the considerations will be a stone foundation or potentially a very early concrete foundation, which might be just as bad as stone. Also brick, we see that every once in a while, but generally turn of the century of 1900s, you will see a lot more stone foundations. Some of them can be very good and the house will still be standing, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily waterproof or that you would want to finish that basement. So it really depends on what you see at the home. It depends on how well it's been maintained over the last 100 years. And that will really determine whether it is a problem or not. But that is one thing that we do look at when you're looking at a home of that age. You have to factor in the foundation, especially being in Winnipeg where we are built on a substrate of clay. we're a riverbed area that, used to flood over and over and over again. So our substrate is not very strong. We're not building on bedrock or packed sand or anything that you do see in a lot of different provinces. Most of what our construction is in this area is clay. So you will see most new houses built on piles, friction piles in the ground, but that just didn't exist at the time back then. So also 1900s, early 1900s, some other considerations would be, what does the wiring look like? Is it knob and tube? Has it been updated? What sort of breaker systems or fuse panel systems or fuse boxes? There's a lot of different things that would have been changed over time that may or may not be up to code now, depending on whether someone has owned the house for a long time or if there's been short periods of time of transition. As you move through the 1900s, you'll start to see some different eras of issues. To be honest, I can't remember exactly when this came into play, but galvanized plumbing for interior water supply is an issue. Insurance does not want that to be in houses. So if you're still seeing homes that are supplying water through a galvanized water line, which is generally a lead or steel line, they tend to corrode and they tend to rust. So not good for your health, something that they don't want to see in there. They also cause leaks fairly frequently. We do still see it once in a while. I actually showed a property last week that still had a little bit of active galvanized plumbing in it. So it's still around. There are also things like in the 70s, you have aluminum wiring was a big component because there was a copper shortage and there was a lot more of the houses built with aluminum wiring. At least you will see them on the main floor. Now, typically you see that in like the late 1960s, sometimes, generally up until about 1976. Again, there can be a bit of a swing in there, but if you are looking at a house in those ages, it's very important to have a look and make sure that you are seeing copper wiring and not necessarily aluminum. Again, it's not the end of the world if you have aluminum. We'll talk about that in a bit, but it is just something that is becoming more of a problem in Winnipeg and something to look out for when we're viewing homes. Other time period things are really just what was built with at the time that, things changed. Maybe they tried something new and it didn't work very well. So it was something that changed and something that they no longer use or they've tried to get rid of. Something like poly B plumbing is also a problem. So that was a very short time frame. We actually don't see a lot of it here in Winnipeg. We've seen it a few times and it is around, but it generally was if people kind of did their own renovations and used it. It's very rare that you see like a whole house with poly B plumbing, but it is something to consider. Obviously things like vermiculite in the attic or asbestos, different tiling products, different drywall mud or taping, that type of stuff. A lot of those were used with an asbestos portion built into them. So if asbestos is something you're concerned about, it is something that I would recommend testing if you get a house or you're just not sure and you want to do some renovations. Do a sample test of whether it's like stipple sealing or some drywall compound or flooring. It was in a lot of things. So if it's something you're concerned about, get it tested. That's the only way to really know. But yeah, that was kind of throughout time. It's very rare that you'll see it in products that are constructed nowadays, but on older products, especially like, again, older houses that have like boiler systems, they typically had asbestos wrapped heat lines or an asbestos wrapped boiler. So those things do still exist. We still see those quite frequently, mostly because the systems still worked and they didn't need a lot of maintenance. So why replace them? But as it's getting into more of an issue for insurance and people's health, people are tending to get rid of them. So some of the bigger headaches that we can see are, like I mentioned, knob and tube wiring. The reason that one's such a big one is it costs a lot of money to, the wiring running through the house, trying to find it, rewire it, reroute it so that everything is now up to code, that's really a lot of work, a lot of cutting, a lot of patching, a lot of replacing. So that does tend to cost a fair bit. The bigger your house, obviously, the worse it is. You know, if your runs are in the attic or they're running through the wall horizontally, that creates a bigger problem because the electricians have to run it a very different way. Always get a quote. They are typically, for a smaller home, I've seen up to 20, 25,000 to redo a home for knob and tube. Again, that's probably worst case scenario. A lot of the time, some of it has been remediated and changed, so it's not always the end of the world. But just know that that will be a cost that your insurance is going to want you to remove pretty much immediately. I did talk about galvanized plumbing, but again, insurance is not going to want that in your property. It's one of those things where if you do see it and you see it active, a lot of times you can still see it in the property because it was just too hard to remove from the walls. But that doesn't mean that it's still in functioning condition. So if it's just there and it's not actually part of the water service system anymore, it doesn't really matter. It's just if it's still being used as your water supply system in the home that you would have to replace it. Foundation styles, obviously, we talked about stone. Some of the other things we do have here that can be very problematic from a foundation perspective is concrete block. I'm sure that there are lots of places in Canada, US that build with this, but it wasn't very consistent for a build in Manitoba to be built with these, and which is proving over time that it's a good thing they didn't, because they shift a lot and they don't maintain a structure and they don't really have a good waterproofing system. So that is one thing that can be a big headache if you're buying a house with a concrete block system, mainly because fixing it is not an easy task. Hopefully it's still in good condition, but really maintenance is the best thing to do on those. And if the maintenance hasn't been done over the years, going back in time isn't really going to help you. As I alluded to a little bit, aluminum wiring, we have in the past, 10 years or so dealt with a lot of it. And there was a simple fix at one point where you could just pigtail within the boxes and the outlets to make sure that it had a copper ground with a aluminum rated moret, and then that wasn't an issue. However, we are hearing in Winnipeg at least that insurers are pulling away from this, and they are not really wanting to insure as often, or as many insurers don't want to insure aluminum anymore. So I do believe in the next few years, it is going to be almost on the same level of knob and tube, where if you buy a house with aluminum wiring, you are likely going to be replacing it in your future, or know that you may potentially have a hard time selling to a new buyer because they will be required to replace it. Again, that's a bit of speculation from speaking with professionals in the field of insurance, but we have been seeing that headache a little bit more in the past 6 months or so, and I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit worse as we go forward in the next few years. Asbestos, talked about it already. It's one of those things that is in just about everything from a certain time period back. So, stipple ceiling, especially if it has the shiny kind of sparkle in it, there's a very high likelihood that it has asbestos in it. Floor tiles, like vinyl floor tiles from, the 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever it was, that are smaller than a foot by a foot. Even the ones that are a foot by a foot, it doesn't mean that they're not asbestos. It's just the chances of them being asbestos when they're under a foot by a foot size is much higher. Again, you can get this tested at many different companies in Winnipeg, and really the issue is airborne asbestos. So if you're renovating and you're tearing things apart, that's when you really need to be careful about it. There are many remediation companies here that would help do that stuff. It is not cheap. So just keep that in mind if you are thinking of doing renovations in an older home that may potentially have asbestos in it. Some of the other things that we look for on showings for issues are, and again, we're not professionals, so if there's things we see, we are typically going to refer you to someone who knows better, but some things are very clear to see as an issue. So we do look at like shingles, age of shingles, whether they're in good condition. We do get a lot of hail, we get a lot of wind in Manitoba, so we do see some shingles disappearing sometimes. Some people don't really pay attention to the roof that often. So just things to keep track of. Obviously, eaves, troughs, and downspouts. The biggest issue in Winnipeg from a weather perspective is always water. We are always trying to keep water away from our foundations. So grading work, you know, just standard maintenance things that people just sort of forget about when living in a house. But these are all items that we do have a look at while we're going through a home. I'm sure there are a lot more items that we could mention. You know, obviously condition of the home, how it's kept. A lot of those things, if they're just cosmetic, it's not necessarily a concern for the home. It may be something that you want to fix, but my bigger concern on a showing is the stuff that you know, you're not prepared for. So like if you find something that could be a foundation crack, or could be knob and tube, or could be aluminum or something like that, something that is not super readily visible that you would have to potentially factor in a fair bit of money to repair or replace, those are the types of things that I'm going to focus on as an issue with the home. Again, not an extensive list. There are lots of other things that I'm sure we could talk about, and there are lots of other things that do come up in showings. I just want to preface this one more time. I am not a professional in electrical, plumbing, any of those things, but spending enough time in houses, speaking with the lenders, speaking with the insurance people, doing home inspections many times a year with clients, you do keep up to date with this stuff, and we do spend a lot of time focusing on it so our clients don't have to as much as we do. I hope that this is informative for you on some of the items. If you have any questions about concerns for purchasing or even selling your house in Winnipeg or the Winnipeg area, feel free to reach out to us. We at the Queen team, we do a lot of business in the city. We're more than happy to help. Feel free to answer questions. All of our information is below. I'm Logan Queen with the Queen team and RE/MAX Professionals. Again, thanks for spending some time with us looking at this video. We hope it helped. Have a great day.